Across the lobby, two black women exchanged knowing looks. Their expressions carried no surprise, only weary recognition. They had seen this before. Perhaps they had lived it. Reed's jaw tightened. "Are we finished?" he asked, voice steady but carrying across the marble hall. "Or would you like to continue this public spectacle?" "Don't get smart," Hale snapped, shoving Reed's belongings back with unnecessary roughness. "We're escorting you out. Don't come back without proper authorization." Outside, the night air was cool, but the officer's words burned hotter than any flame. Without the crowd watching, Hale's professionalism slipped. "Let me make something clear. You'd be smarter not to come back here. Is that a threat?" Reed asked quietly. His voice carried more steel now. "Or are you banning me based on my race rather than my actions?" Hale's face hardened. "Next time it won't be a conversation." Reed said nothing more. But every detail seared into his memory. The posture, the tone, the exact phrasing. His training turned humiliation into evidence. Moments later, his phone buzzed. The caller ID lit up. Director James Carter. Reed answered softly. "It happened again, sir." "Details." Carter's voice was sharp, concerned. Reed recounted everything with surgical precision. Benson's assumption, Hale's escalation, the public humiliation. Beneath the professionalism, Carter could hear the controlled fury in Reed's tone. "Your call," Carter said. "We can postpone tomorrow's operation. Reassign it if needed." "No," Reed said immediately. "The financial investigation proceeds. But I'm documenting this incident for a secondary protocol." "You're certain?" "They need to see both sides of the coin." The silence on the line was heavy, but when Carter spoke again, his words carried weight. "Understood. Full support. Document everything." Reed ended the call and sat quietly in his sedan. The operation he had planned for months was still on track. But now another mission had emerged, and this time, the stakes weren't only about money, they were about truth. Morning light poured across the Baltimore skyline as Marcus Reed tightened the zipper on his dark windbreaker. The golden FBI shield gleamed against the fabric, no longer hidden. Today was not a night of quiet reconnaissance. Today was an operation. Behind him, 12 agents fell into formation. Each carried body cameras, each held federal warrants. Their precision mirrored military efficiency, the kind that left no room for doubt. The revolving doors of Hamilton Tower spun open, and Marcus Reed strode inside with calm authority. "Special Agent in Charge Reed," he announced at the security desk, presenting his credentials. "These are federal warrants authorizing immediate access. We require master key cards and all security protocols." The young guard at the desk froze, wide-eyed at the sudden arrival of federal agents. Before he could respond, Carl Benson emerged from the back office. His face paled the instant he recognized Reed. "Agent, I didn't realize yesterday." "There must have been a misunderstanding." Reed turned, gaze sharp, voice level. "Mr. Benson, we require immediate access to secured locations. Now." He slid a thick folder of warrants across the counter without waiting for explanations. Benson's hands trembled as he dialed the building owner, Richard Whitman, a man whose empire sat at the center of Reed's investigation. "Sir, the FBI is here. They're executing warrants. The man I had removed yesterday, he's leading them." Upstairs, the agents moved like a storm. "Rivera, take the 14th floor. Jackson, 15th. Williams, secure the server room." Orders flowed from Reed with practiced clarity. Agents dispersed, sweeping through hallways, evidence bags at the ready. The building's glass and steel calm was shattered by the precision of federal authority. Benson hovered helplessly near the lobby, his bravado drained. The security protocols he once boasted of were nothing compared to the clipped commands of trained federal agents. 7 minutes later, Sergeant Hale arrived, uniform hastily thrown on. He stopped cold at the sight. Agents in windbreakers moved methodically through offices, pulling files, tagging computers, photographing ledgers. Hale's hand dropped from his belt as recognition hit. At the center of it all stood Reed, directing with calm confidence, the same man Hale had humiliated less than 12 hours earlier. Reed looked up. Their eyes locked. He offered nothing more than a professional nod before returning to the task at hand. The reversal was complete. The elevator chimed. A distinguished older man stepped out. Silver hair, custom suit, presence that radiated wealth. Richard Whitman, owner of the Hamilton Tower and primary target of the financial probe. His stride faltered when he saw the scene. Federal agents combing through his empire. Cameras strapped to their chests. Warrants in hand, what is the meaning of this? Whitman demanded, his voice quivering with forced outrage. Reed approached slowly, his calm presence unshaken. Mr. Whitman, Special Agent in Charge Reed, FBI Financial Crimes Division. These warrants authorize immediate investigation into securities fraud and money laundering involving your companies. Whitman tried to steel himself. This is an outrage. I have connections in Washington who will hear about this. That statement has been recorded, Reed said evenly. His voice carried the weight of quiet power. I advise against saying anything that could be construed as obstruction. Whitman's confidence cracked for a brief second. He quickly recovered, pointing at Benson. This man you call Agent Reed, he was reported to me last night as a trespasser. My security informed me. Reed turned his gaze to Benson. His eyes sharpened. Perhaps you'd like to explain that incident to Mr. Whitman, the one where you reported me as suspicious based solely on my appearance. Benson's mouth opened and closed. No words came. His flushed face spoke volumes. Whitman shifted uneasily. I had no knowledge of that matter. Benson acted independently. Reed's voice cut through. Interesting. Yet phone records show he called you immediately after I was escorted out. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. We'll confirm the contents of that call. The silence grew heavy. Whitman's mask slipped. Benson looked cornered. Hale stood rigid, trying to remain unnoticed. But Reed wasn't finished. Agent Rivera, he called. A Hispanic agent cataloging files turned toward him. Work with Mr. Benson to provide access to all restricted areas. Benson stiffened. Taking orders from the very people he tried to bar yesterday was salt in a wound he could not hide. His hesitation revealed what his words did not. Bias laid bare. Reed turned his focus back to Whitman. We'll require complete cooperation. Anything less will be treated as interference in a federal investigation. Before Whitman could reply, an agent approached. Sir, body camera footage confirms building security deliberately obstructed initial reconnaissance. Requesting clearance to add civil rights violations to the record. Reed nodded once. Approved. The words dropped like a hammer. Benson froze. Hale's jaw tightened. Whitman's expression collapsed from arrogance to alarm. The financial investigation was no longer the only storm sweeping through Hamilton Tower. Now there were two, one for fraud and one for justice. The night was quiet, but danger was already waiting. On your knees, boy. The harsh command sliced through the silence like a blade. 3 uniformed officers surrounded a tall black man in a tailored navy suit. Their weapons glinted under the dim lobby lights of a corporate tower. Their faces hardened with suspicion. One officer shoved his knee into the man's back, pressing him down onto cold marble. You picked the wrong building to case tonight. I said, knees, you deaf? This is restricted property. The man did not resist. His breathing remained steady even as his cheek pressed against the polished floor. The glow of his expensive wristwatch reflected in the light, a silent reminder of his stature. I have identification, he said calmly. His voice carried no tremor, no fear. Shut it. Hands where we can see them. You think we're stupid. Your kind doesn't belong here. The words struck like daggers. Yet he remained composed, moving with deliberate care. Slowly, painfully slowly, he reached inside his jacket. The officers expected excuses. They expected counterfeit IDs or nervous lies. What they did not expect was the badge he pulled out. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Marcus Reed, in charge of this operation, and every second of what you're doing is being recorded. The blood drained from the officers' faces. Shock flickered in their eyes, followed by fear. They had mistaken the leader of a federal task force for a criminal trespasser. But this was only the beginning. Earlier that same day, Marcus Reed had stepped from his unmarked sedan, adjusting the cuffs of his suit as he studied the gleaming structure before him. The Hamilton Tower, a financial hub in downtown Baltimore, rose into the fading light. 12 corporations filled its glass halls. 3 of them were already under federal suspicion for laundering millions. The sun dipped low, scattering golden light across the mirrored facade. Reed checked his watch. 7:20 p.m. Perfect. Most employees were gone, leaving the building hushed but still accessible. Security presence would be light, cameras active, guards complacent. This was exactly how he wanted it. Initial recon tonight. Full operation at 0900, he murmured into his concealed earpiece. His team acknowledged quietly. positioned at hidden vantage points around the perimeter. Reed pushed open the revolving door with the air of a man who belonged. No badge on display, no overt markers of authority. That was protocol. Tonight was about observation, not confrontation. Every detail mattered. The camera angles, the placement of the security desk, the timing of guard rotations. He cataloged each with the trained eye of a man who had spent 15 years dissecting financial crime networks. But while Reed moved with calm efficiency, another man was already watching him with suspicion. In the cramped security office, Carl Benson, a veteran guard with 2 decades in private security, leaned closer to the flickering monitor. His eyes narrowed as he watched Reed examine the building directory. "Who's this guy?" he muttered. Tall, well-dressed, confident. But something about him unsettled Benson. To Reed, the building directory was a map of hidden secrets. To Benson, it was evidence of a stranger snooping where he didn't belong. "Not on my watch," Benson whispered. He grabbed his phone, the decision already made. Within minutes, Reed's careful reconnaissance turned into a call for backup. "Dispatch, this is Hamilton Tower Security. Got a suspicious male on restricted floors after hours. Black male. About 6 feet. Athletic build. Expensive suit. Acting strange. Taking photos. Examining security features. Looks like he's preparing for a break-in." The dispatcher hesitated. "Any criminal history?" "Unknown," Benson replied. His eyes didn't leave the screen. "But he doesn't belong here." That single assumption would ignite a chain reaction. Blue lights flashed across the city blocks as 3 patrol cars closed in on the tower. Doors opened. Officers stepped out with their hands already near their holsters. Up on the 14th floor, Reed continued his methodical survey, dictating encrypted notes into his phone. He had no idea that his race, not his actions, had already painted him as a target. "Police. Stop right there." The shout froze the moment. Reed looked up to see 3 officers blocking his path. Their leader, Sergeant Hale, mid-40s with a square jaw and narrowed eyes, already had his hand resting on his gun. Reed's instincts sharpened instantly. He raised his hand slowly, palms forward, his voice calm and even. "Good evening, officers. Is there a problem?" The hook had been set. The trap was closing, and Marcus Reed, special agent in charge of a major federal investigation, was about to be treated as if he were nothing more than a trespasser. The hallway stretched silent, lined with polished doors that concealed secrets worth millions. Yet at that moment, all Marcus Reed saw were 3 officers closing in, their suspicion sharper than their weapons. Sergeant Hale's voice rang out, steady but dripping with authority. "Building security reported suspicious activity. What's your business here after hours?" Reed breathed slowly, every muscle attuned to danger. He had faced cartel enforcers, corrupt bankers, and mob associates. But this situation felt different. The risk here wasn't just professional, it was personal. "I'm conducting a property assessment," Reed answered evenly. His words were intentionally vague. To reveal his identity now would destroy months of undercover preparation. But Benson, the guard who had summoned the police, stepped out of the elevator at just the wrong moment. His finger pointed like a weapon. "That's him. He's been snooping around restricted floors for nearly half an hour." The officers tightened formation. "ID," Hale snapped. His hand hovered over his holster, ready to escalate. Reed nodded calmly. "I'm going to reach for my wallet slowly." "Do it slow," Hale barked. The tension in the air was so thick it seemed to vibrate. Another officer shifted slightly to block the stairwell exit, a subtle move that Reed caught immediately. Every detail mattered. From the corner of his eye, Reed noted Benson's smug posture, arms folded, jaw set. "Never seen him before," Benson declared. "Doesn't have clearance for the executive floors." Reed's face betrayed nothing. He carefully withdrew his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Hale studied it, deliberately ignoring the credentials that sat right behind the license. Credentials that, if revealed, would flip this entire scene upside down. "Marcus Reed," Hale read aloud. He let the civilian address linger like bait. "Care to explain what kind of property assessment involves photographing security cameras and taking notes on exits?" Reed's voice remained calm. "It's standard procedure." He offered nothing more. "Standard procedure for what?" Benson interrupted, his voice rising. "This man's been casing the building. I'm telling you, he's trespassing." Reed's eyes narrowed slightly. His tone sharpened, though still controlled. Your building? And what evidence besides my appearance suggests I don't belong here? Benson flushed crimson, words tripping over themselves. The way you were behaving was suspicious. Looking at cameras, writing things down. Who does that? Hale handed back only the driver's license, sliding the federal ID back into the wallet without acknowledgement. The dismissal was intentional, a power move. We've received credible reports of suspicious activity. That's enough for us to act, Hale said, stepping closer. His eyes hardened. Final warning. Prove you belong here or you're leaving in handcuffs. The hook tightened. The trap was nearly sprung. Marcus Reed's mind raced. If he revealed his FBI authority, the operation would collapse. The targets would scatter and weeks of work would be lost. If he stayed silent, the humiliation would deepen, but the investigation would remain intact. I'll comply, Reed said finally, his voice level. But first I need your names and badge numbers. That single sentence sliced through the moment. Hale hesitated before reciting his information, each syllable reluctant. The other officers followed, discomfort flickering across their faces. Reed memorized every detail with forensic precision. Let's move this to the lobby, Hale ordered, positioning himself close, almost shoulder to shoulder, as if Reed were already in custody. Benson strutted ahead like a hero awaiting applause. The elevator opened to the grand lobby, where a handful of late workers gathered their belongings. Most were white professionals who froze at the sight of Reed escorted by officers. Murmurs rippled through the space. Phones rose discreetly. Recording had begun. Premises secured, Benson announced loudly, his voice theatrical. Threat neutralized, folks. Nothing to worry about. The words hung heavy with subtext. The crowd didn't miss it. Neither did Reed. He subtly shifted so his face was clear in every recording phone, silently gathering evidence of his own. Stand here, Hale commanded, directing him under the brightest lobby lights. Empty your pockets, everything on the desk. Reed raised his eyebrows. Is this standard procedure for someone who hasn't been charged with anything? Just do it, Hale snapped. Reed complied deliberately, one item at a time. Wallet, phone, keys, a slim notebook. Hale snatched the notebook and flipped through it. What's this? Hale sneered. Floor plans? Security notes? Looks like criminal planning to me. They're professional observations, Reed replied, his tone clipped. Nothing illegal about noting building features, the crowd whispered. A few shook their heads, but Benson puffed his chest, relishing the spotlight. This is what happens when we stay vigilant. This is how we keep our building safe. He shot Reed a pointed glance. From people like him. The storm inside Hamilton Tower was only the beginning. Once the warrants were served and the evidence secured, the tremors of accountability spread fast. Day one ended with the FBI sealing entire floors, locking down files, and escorting out stunned executives. By nightfall, the news had already broken. Local channels broadcast live shots of agents moving boxes of documents under flashing headlines. FBI raids Hamilton Tower, and dual investigation, fraud and civil rights bias. By the next morning, the story was national. Benson sat alone in his modest apartment, staring at the television as his own face appeared on the screen. Reporters replayed grainy lobby footage captured by bystanders the night before. His booming voice echoed through the broadcast. Security threat neutralized, folks. Nothing to worry about. The video cut to Reed standing calmly under the lobby lights, emptying his pockets with quiet dignity. The contrast was undeniable. Benson's phone buzzed with texts. Some were mocking. Others were angry. His employer called soon after, voice clipped and cold. Carl, you're being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Effective immediately. Benson's protest fell flat. The line clicked dead. His career, once his pride, was crumbling under the weight of his own words. Meanwhile, Sergeant Hale walked into the precinct only to find his commanding officer waiting with folded arms. We've got internal affairs all over us, the captain said. Body cam footage doesn't look good. You escalated without cause. You ignored federal ID. You turned a professional into a spectacle. Hale's jaw tightened. I was following procedure. The captain leaned closer. Procedure doesn't cover ignoring a badge, and it doesn't cover racial bias documented on camera. For the first time in years, Hale felt something he wasn't used to. Vulnerability. Inside his temporary command center, Marcus Reed watched the coverage unfold with a measured gaze. His wall was now covered with photographs, charts, and evidence maps. The fraud investigation was expanding rapidly. What began as $40 million in suspicious activity had already climbed closer to $65 million. Shell companies, offshore accounts, falsified returns. But alongside the financial crimes, a second wall was filling. Names, incidents. 17 separate cases where people of color had been stopped, questioned, or humiliated in the Hamilton Tower lobby. All connected to Benson, all eerily similar. None had resulted in any charges. Reed stood in front of the wall in silence, the weight of it pressing down. He could have ended it the night before with one flash of his badge, but he hadn't. He had chosen to stand as those 17 others could not. Now their voices would be heard. Day 3 brought Benson's downfall deeper into public view. The property management company issued a statement. "We take allegations seriously. Effective immediately, Mr. Benson has been suspended pending review of his conduct. We are also reviewing all security protocols to ensure fairness and non-discrimination." The language was corporate and cold, but the message was clear. Benson was finished. Day 5 saw the police department dragged further into the storm. Internal Affairs opened an official investigation into Hale's conduct. A younger female officer, who had been in the lobby during Reed's humiliation, came forward. She admitted unease that night. She admitted it wasn't the first time she had seen Hale escalate against minorities without cause. 3 more officers followed her lead, breaking the silence that once shielded him. The department's deputy commissioner held a press conference, sweat beading under the camera lights. "We are implementing immediate retraining and reviewing all civilian complaints involving Sergeant Hale from the past 5 years. This department takes accountability seriously, but everyone watching knew the truth. They were moving because they had been exposed." In the federal building, Reed briefed his team. "These aren't separate issues," he explained, tapping between the fraud wall and the bias wall. The discrimination created a shield. It reduced scrutiny. It allowed financial crimes to flourish unchecked. Each problem reinforced the other. His agents nodded grimly. They knew now they weren't just investigating money laundering. They were dissecting a system where prejudice wasn't only damaging, it was profitable. By day 7, the Department of Justice officially stepped in. The case was elevated to a priority federal task force. Resources poured in. Attorneys from the Civil Rights Division sat side by side with prosecutors from financial crimes. For the first time, the system wasn't looking at one scandal or one bad cop. It was looking at the intersection, where racism became a tool to protect corruption. The hooks grew sharper with every revelation. Whitman, once untouchable, was losing ground by the hour. Benson, once proud of his instincts, was now a cautionary tale. Hale, once shielded by the badge, faced the scrutiny of his own department. And Marcus Reed, calm and methodical, stood at the center of it all. Not just pursuing criminals, not just documenting bias, but proving how deeply they were connected. The storm had only begun. She 9. Richard Whitman sat in his penthouse office, staring out at the skyline he once thought he owned. His phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp and urgent. "I need favors. Now. Senators, judges, anyone who still answers your calls. The FBI is overreaching. They're digging too deep." But instead of reassurance, silence met him. Former allies distanced themselves. Political contacts offered polite excuses. Doors that had once opened instantly now slammed shut. Whitman's empire, built on illusion and influence, was collapsing under its own weight. Meanwhile, Carl Benson tried a different tactic. A television interviewer leaned forward, asking the question the nation wanted answered. "Mr. Benson, why did you identify Agent Reed as suspicious that night?" Benson adjusted his tie, sweat beading at his temples. "I was just doing my job. Anyone acting that way would have raised concerns. I would have reported anyone." "Anyone?" the interviewer pressed. "Can you describe the behavior you found suspicious?" Benson stammered. "Well, intuition, professional instinct. 20 years in security teaches you, a sense." The interviewer's expression sharpened. "But records show you've reported 17 individuals in the past year. All of them people of color. Not one charged with a crime. How do you explain that?" Benson's face reddened. His words faltered. "Coincidence," he muttered. The interview exploded online.
Hashtags filled social media.
Memes mocked his intuition. By evening, the property management company announced his termination. For Carl Benson, the fall was complete. Day 12. The police union released a statement defending Sergeant Hale. Split-second decisions, challenging environments, officers forced to act quickly, but the defense crumbled when body camera footage was made public. The videos revealed a pattern: Hale escalating encounters with minorities without reason, Hale ignoring explanations, Hale turning routine interactions into confrontations. The female officer's testimony sealed it further. I saw him do this at least a dozen times. When I raised concerns, they were dismissed. Public outrage swelled. The department scrambled. Hale was suspended pending review. For the first time in years, the shield of the badge no longer protected him. Inside the Federal Command Center, Marcus Reed listened to the updates with calm focus. These aren't isolated failures, he told his team. They are patterns. Patterns protect crimes. Patterns silence truth. Our job is to break them. The room fell silent, his words hanging heavy. Every agent understood the stakes. Day 14. Whitman's lawyers tried a desperate strategy, separating the financial crimes from the civil rights investigation. Your Honor, these are unrelated matters. Linking them is prejudicial. But Reed's team produced damning evidence. Emails and call logs showing Whitman encouraging Benson's vigilance. Direct lines between discrimination at the door and fraud in the boardroom. Mr. Whitman created an environment where appearance dictated access, Reed explained to prosecutors. That environment kept unwanted scrutiny out and protected financial misconduct. The connection is direct. The courtroom stirred with murmurs. Whitman's mask of control slipped further. Day 17. The media firestorm reached a new peak. Headlines flashed across screens. Fraud and bias, FBI connects the dots. 17 victims speak out against Hamilton Tower security. Dual investigation shakes Baltimore's elite. One by one, people who had once been silenced came forward. A doctor in a lab coat, a lawyer with case files, an engineer with a laptop bag. Each recounted humiliation at the tower's lobby. Each story was different, but the pattern was the same. Stopped, questioned, dismissed, and each story now became fuel for the storm. Day 21. Reed met privately with some of these victims in a quiet federal conference room. Their voices carried gratitude but also pain. You could have shown your badge and ended it, one woman said, her eyes glassy. But you didn't. You stood in our place. You let the system show its true face. Reed's expression remained professional, but in his eyes burned the weight of responsibility. He had chosen humiliation so others would not be forgotten. Day 25. Whitman's final defenses shattered. Communications revealed he had explicitly instructed Benson to keep outsiders away from upper floors. Outsiders, the evidence showed, meant anyone who didn't fit his narrow image of belonging. The direct link between discrimination and financial fraud was undeniable. Whitman's empire had not only been built on deception, it had been shielded by prejudice. By day 30, the evidence walls inside Reed's command center were overflowing. Millions in fraud documented, 17 incidents of profiling traced and confirmed, body cameras, witness testimonies, digital forensics all converged into a case, airtight and undeniable. The hooks were no longer questions of if, they were questions of how far this case would reach and how deeply it would change everything. Day 35. The federal courtroom was packed. Tension so thick it felt like the air itself could shatter. Reporters lined the benches. Cameras waited outside. At the defense table sat Richard Whitman, his silver hair slicked, his once commanding posture reduced to a man cornered. Beside him, lawyers shuffled papers with grim urgency. On the witness stand stood Marcus Reed, calm, composed, his dark suit immaculate. His words precise. Our investigation revealed Mr. Whitman operated a sophisticated Ponzi scheme through multiple companies, Reed stated clearly. Investor funds were diverted into personal accounts, funneled into offshore shells and disguised through falsified returns. The losses total approximately $68 million. Whitman's attorney tried to interrupt, painting him as a respected businessman who had made errors. But Reed dismantled the claim piece by piece. Bank transfers, internal emails, fabricated statements, every detail documented, every number undeniable. These weren't mistakes, Reed said. They were deliberate, systematic, sustained over 7 years. The judge leaned forward, eyes sharp. Bail was denied. Federal marshals rose. Whitman was led away in handcuffs, glaring at Reed with eyes that had once controlled boardrooms but now betrayed only desperation. Across town, Sergeant Hale faced his own reckoning. An internal review board listened as the young female officer testified again. I saw him escalate encounters with minorities at least a dozen times. There was never reasonable suspicion. When I reported concerns, they were dismissed as oversensitivity. Body camera footage rolled. Civilian complaints were read aloud. Other officers stepped forward, emboldened by the moment. Hale sat rigid, but his mask cracked. This was no isolated incident. This was a pattern. The board's recommendation was swift: termination and referral for possible civil rights charges. Hale's career, once untouchable, was finished. Carl Benson sat at a hearing with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. His voice wavered as investigators pressed him. "Mr. Benson, did you request identification from white visitors at the same rate as minorities?" "I approached people who looked suspicious," he muttered. "And how did you define suspicious?" His words faltered. "Professional instinct," he repeated. "Behavior patterns." But the security footage told the truth more clearly than his excuses. Every pause, every demand, every humiliation. The evidence spoke louder than he could. He left the room defeated, his career in ruins. For Marcus Reed, the work wasn't about personal victory. He attended hearings when needed, offering testimony. More often, he simply observed as accountability rippled outward. He knew the impact was larger than any single man. The police department entered a consent decree with federal oversight. Training programs were rewritten. Body camera footage underwent algorithmic review to flag bias before it took root. Officers who once remained silent now stepped forward. Change had begun. Whitman's empire crumbled. Assets frozen. Victims prepared to receive restitution. His name, once synonymous with wealth and power, became a warning etched in headlines. Benson's humiliation became a case study in how bias disguised as vigilance could destroy both careers and institutions. And Reed? He returned to his office with more resolve than ever. 6 months later, the auditorium at the FBI Academy filled with new recruits. Reed stood at the podium, his presence commanding not by volume but by quiet certainty. "The Hamilton Tower case taught us a simple truth," he began. "Financial crimes thrive when systems meant to protect are corrupted by bias. Discrimination is not just a social issue, it becomes a shield for wrongdoing. Each one feeds the other." The cadets leaned forward. Every word carried the weight of experience, not theory. True accountability isn't about punishment alone. It's about transformation. It's about dismantling the systems that enable harm. Our work is to ensure the same mistakes are never repeated. Justice must be thorough. It must be permanent. Silence followed, heavy but inspired. For the cadets, this was not just training. It was a call. That evening, Reed drove past Hamilton Tower. Now under new ownership, its lobby had changed. The security desk staffed by diverse personnel. A plaque on the wall declared, "All visitors welcome. Equal treatment is our standard." Reed stopped his car briefly, staring at the building where humiliation had once pressed him to the marble floor. He felt no need for recognition, no desire for credit. The change was enough. Justice wasn't just about who was punished. It was about what was prevented. The confrontations that would never happen again. The careers no longer stifled. The quiet progress, invisible yet powerful. Marcus Reed turned the ignition and drove on, his work far from finished. Because justice is not a single moment, it is a mission, and his mission had only just begun.